Hey guys, Chris Fix here, and today I'm going to put an end to all the questions and myths surrounding automatic transmission fluid. Transmissions are pretty expensive, and getting a replacement transmission or even a rebuilt transmission could cost you thousands of dollars. And rebuilding your transmission is typically not something most people could do at home without special tools and training. And for whatever reason, people tend to forget about transmission maintenance, and it doesn't help that manufacturers are coming out with these sealed transmissions that make maintenance even more difficult. No matter what automatic transmission you have, the fluid does get hot, it breaks down, and heat is the #1 killer of transmissions. Now I'm going to cover many different questions you might have, and myths you might have heard. But if you still have questions on something I didn't cover, feel free to leave a comment below. So there are 3 common questions that come up when dealing with the transmission fluid. When should you change the transmission fluid in your car? Can changing the transmission fluid damage my transmission? And should I do a transmission fluid flush or change? So to answer the first question on when you should change your transmission fluid, well, check out the owner's manual. And right here you can see it says inspect automatic transmission fluid every 15,000 miles. But this is for my truck specifically, so make sure you check your owner's manual. In this 2008 Mercury Milan, it tells you to change the fluid every 60,000 miles. Not just to inspect it, but to change it. But again, every car is different. Another way you could tell if you need to change your transmission fluid is inspecting the fluid. You want to inspect the transmission fluid straight from the dipstick in your vehicle. And if you have a sealed transmission with no dipstick, I'll show you how to check that in a second. But first, let me show you how to check the transmission fluid in a normal automatic transmission with a dipstick. In this case, we'll be using my Corvette for an example. With the engine at operating temperature and the transmission fluid warm, that's when you want to check your transmission fluid. And the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look for your transmission dipstick. You can see here, there's the oil dipstick, and then if you look back here in this car, the transmission dipstick's right here. I always use a white paper towel so you could get a good idea of what color the transmission fluid is. So you can see the transmission fluid goes up to the cross thatch markings over here, and that's exactly where you want it. You can also see on here it says warm, 190 degrees, and then it also has the 80 degrees. 80 degrees is when you check it when it's cold, 190 is when you check it when it's warm. I prefer checking it when it's warm. And then on the dipstick it tells you check in park, the engine idling, vehicle level, and the transmission should be hot. And it should go up to the cross thatch, and don't overfill it. So just having the dipstick out gives you a ton of information. Plus, we want to look at the color of the transmission fluid on the white paper towel. And I'll go over that right now, and in this case, the Vette looks good. So let's go check out the fluid inside the garage. When inspecting the fluid in good condition should be bright pink, and it should look just like this. Fluid that's starting to wear out and needs to be replaced will look darker, just like this, but it'll still have a slight pink tint to it. And fluid from a transmission that hasn't been changed in a long time, which actually caused that transmission some damage, will smell burnt and look dark, just like this. And if it's really bad, it'll even have metallic specks in it. So both checking the owner's manual and checking the condition of the fluid are 2 ways to know when you should change your transmission fluid. But unfortunately, it's not always that easy. For this Jaguar, if we look in the owner's manual, you won't find any information on checking or changing the transmission fluid. And while looking under the hood, there's no dipstick anywhere. And the reason why is because Jaguars have sealed transmissions. Many newer cars like this Ford Fiesta here also have sealed transmissions. If you look in the owner's manual, there's nothing in here about transmission fluid service. And then if we look in the engine compartment, you can see there is no transmission fluid dipstick. We have an oil dipstick, but that's it. Let's get the Jaguar on ramps, and I'm going to show you how to check a sealed transmission. Now, I don't like the idea of lifetime fluid because every transmission has vent tubes to allow the pressure in the transmission to equalize. Over time, that breather tube allows moisture and dust to contaminate the fluid. I suggest inspecting the lifetime fluid at about 100,000 miles to see what condition it's in. The good thing is sealed transmissions aren't actually sealed. There's a fill bolt and a drain bolt. If we look down here in this Jaguar, you can see this bolt right there, there's a rubber cap on it. That's the fill bolt. So you take the rubber cap off of that, you unscrew it, you put your funnel here, and you can fill the transmission. And when there's a fill bolt, there's a drain bolt. If we go underneath the car, we take a look under here, and you can easily see right there is the drain bolt. Nice big bolt connected to the transmission. And then usually there are just 2 bolts, but Jaguar makes it complicated. And if we look right here, that bolt that's kind of hidden back there, that is the fluid level bolt. So you unscrew that, and if the transmission fluid is filled, you'll get a little bit of fluid coming out of there. The next question, and probably the most common question I get asked, is can changing the transmission fluid damage your transmission? The easy answer to that is no, changing the transmission fluid isn't going to damage any components in your transmission. And to show you why, this is an 03 Nissan Maxima transmission that I took apart for you, and I laid out all the different components on this bench. And if you think about it, the condition of these parts is what it is. Changing the fluid isn't going to change that. So these ring gears here, these are either in good condition or bad condition. The bearings in all these are either in good condition or bad condition. The clutch pack in this is either in good condition or bad condition. Adding fluid isn't really going to change anything. And I say isn't really because when dealing with the clutches, if your clutches are worn out and your fluid is burnt or damaged and has metallic specks in it, odds are your clutches are bad. So if you flush out the system and put in this brand new fluid with none of that clutch material floating around, well, your transmission might slip. I'm going to take this apart right now and show you why. So these are the clutch packs that I've been talking about, and when an automatic transmission slips, this is why. These clutch packs wear out and they can't grip. Now they use fluid pressure to really grip on and then allow you to go into whatever gear you're in, first, second, third, fourth. If you don't change your transmission fluid and it's black like this transmission fluid doesn't have good lubrication properties and it'll heat up very easily and it'll cause these clutches to wear out. And when these clutches wear out, your transmission is going to slip. If you see little metallic specks in your fluid, some of that is clutch material suspended in your fluid. So when that fluid's in here and there's all that suspended clutch material, it might be just enough to help these clutches engage, even though your clutches are worn out. Now if you completely flush your black transmission fluid, you're going to have this nice new transmission fluid in there. Sure, it provides better lubrication and better heat dissipation, but you don't have any of that clutch material suspended in the fluid anymore because you flushed that out. So now your worn out transmission might start slipping. But that's only going to happen if your transmission fluid is dark, if it's burnt, if you haven't changed it in a really long time, and it's not in this nice good pink condition that we want to see. Now this brings me to my next question. Should you change the transmission fluid or should you flush the transmission fluid? And the easy answer to that is check your owner's manual. In the owner's manual, it'll tell you change or flush. But what if when you inspect your fluid, it's black or has metallic specks in it? Or if you don't know the service history, what should you do? A change or a flush? Before I explain that, let me explain the difference between a fluid change and a fluid flush. So again, here's our transmission, and if we're going to do a transmission fluid change, there's going to either be a drain bolt under here, or we're going to drop this whole pan, and then any fluid that's in here is going to get changed out. With a transmission fluid change, you're changing about 40%, maybe 50% of the fluid. The rest of the fluid is all through this transmission and it's not going to leak out and drain. There's also a ton of fluid in the torque converter here. This is filled with transmission fluid and you're not going to empty that. So just like you saw in my recent video where I changed the transmission fluid in my truck, the transmission in that truck holds 10 quarts, but I only got 4 quarts out. Now with the transmission fluid flush, you're going to remove all the old fluid. So all the fluid's going to go out and you're going to replace it with all brand new fluid. And taking a look back at our transmission, how they do the flush is the transmission has lines going out. You can see these 2 lines that were cut. So what they'll do at a shop is they'll attach a hose here and a hose here. This line will be going in, that line will be going out. So they'll pump new fluid in as the old fluid gets sucked out. So if your transmission takes 10 quarts, they'll pump 10 quarts out and fill it 10 quarts in. So then you get a complete flush. Now again, when you flush the fluid, if your fluid's in good shape, great. Doing a flush won't cause any problems. But if your fluid is burnt and it's old and black like this, when you do a flush, you could cause a problem in the valve body. This is a valve body, this is at the bottom of the transmission. Here's the transmission filter. We take this apart, and this is what a valve body looks like. It's all these little channels that could easily become gummed up and clogged when your transmission fluid is old and burnt and the transmission hasn't had its normal servicing. Doing a flush is going to add all brand new fluid, and transmission fluid is a really good cleaner, so it's going to clean out all the gunk and it could cause these little passages to get clogged up. And if these passages get clogged up, you're not going to get good shifts and you could lose gears, and that is something you don't want to do just for changing the transmission fluid. And that's how those myths started where, oh, I changed my transmission fluid, now my transmission slips or it won't go into gear. It's because the person's transmission fluid was black and bad just like this. But you don't have to worry about that when your transmission fluid is in good shape like this. So I want to just do a quick recap. Make sure you follow your owner's manual for either doing a flush or a change. It'll tell you what to do in there. Only flush your transmission if the fluid's in good condition. If you're unsure about your transmission's condition, do a fluid change. You could always do another one down the road, and getting some good fluid in there is always a good thing. And the last thing I want to cover is what transmission fluid should you use? And the answer to that is, again, if you guessed it, check your owner's manual. We have tons of transmission fluids here, different brands and also different types of fluid. If you look here, we have type F. If you look here, we have import, we have full synthetic, we have Mercon 5, but all these components need a specific transmission fluid. If we check out the fluid in my truck requires Mercon 5. So you want to make sure that you use Mercon 5 and nothing else. Any other transmission fluid is going to damage that transmission. These transmission fluids have specific additives, viscosities, friction modifiers, and all that stuff is going to make your transmission run properly. Hopefully that clears things up about transmission fluid and servicing the transmission. There's so much misinformation out there that I wanted to create a reliable source with all the facts in one place. As always, hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. Up on the screen are related videos, and to get to those videos, you could click on the screen or you could find the links in the description below.